Hi everybody, in this video we're going to learn about something known as the console and how you can use it to log messages to give you a better idea of what your code is actually doing. Now here's why it's important. Trying to better understand what our code does is something that we've been trying to do forever, and there are many approaches that we may have used in the past. For example, a very common one is this. You have some code that is listening for a button click, and you want to know if the button click actually happens. So in the event handler, you have an alert statement that basically says, check this out. And when this code runs, you'll see a dialog appear. Now, there's nothing wrong with this approach. It's perfectly fine. It kind of ensures if you see this dialog that your code is currently running. But imagine you have a larger application. You have a lot of code that you want to kind of figure out what exactly is going on. In these cases, you might have many dialogs that come up and more dialogs come up, which is really not the best way of keeping track of your application state. Now, there's a better solution. There's something known as the console. Now, I'm going to jump right in and have you bring up the console on your browser. So it's part of the developer tools that every browser has, your Firefox, Edge, Chrome, Safari. And from inside your browser, launch it, press Ctrl-Shift-I on Windows or Command-Alt-I on the Mac to bring up the developer tools. Now, there are many other shortcuts you can use as well, like F12 is a common shortcut on Windows. You can also right-click on an element and choose Bring up the developer tools or Inspect. There are many ways of doing it, but these two are the more consistent approaches that you almost guaranteed to always have working. Now, when you do that, you'll see something that looks as follows. You have your browser, then you have a large piece of UI that appears at the bottom that contains a lot of different things. The important thing to note is that almost all of them will have a tab or a link or a button for what is known as the console. So here's what the console looks like in Chrome, here's what it looks like in Safari, here's what it looks like in Firefox, and of course, here's what it looks like in Edge. Now, what we're going to do though is use this to build an example where we kind of look at the console and how we can use some of its various properties to send some messages onto our screen. So to get started, you can go to this CodePen, bit.ly/Krupa console, but I really recommend you copy and paste the code into your own code editor so you can actually debug it internally on your own browser, because CodePen does come with its own console, which is very consistent with what you might see in the browser, but there might be some quirks that we don't want to deal with right now. So my best suggestion is copy the code, put it in your own code editor, and run it locally on your machine so we can get started. So with that, let's take a look at what the example looks like. So right now, I'm currently in, let's go to Visual Studio Code, if I can find it. And notice here what you see on the screen. Let me make this all a little bigger so you can see it. I have a very simple page that really doesn't do much. You have a button, and when you click on this button, you get some text that shows up in a dialog. I click on the Click Me text, you get a dialog that says, is this working? In fact, if you cannot see it clearly, let me make it a little bigger so it's more visible. Now, what we want to do, though, is look at the various ways we can use the console to make all of this work better. So the first thing we're going to do is this. So right where we have the alert statement, let's go ahead and replace it with a console log. And I'm going to bring up the developer tools just to make this all easier. Now, I mentioned you can use a keyboard shortcut. I'm just going to use right-click and choose Inspect. Just bring it up automatically. So I'm going to go to Console tab, and now you can see our console displayed. And the arrangement of the console can vary depending on your configuration. In this case, I have it appearing on the right-hand side. So I have my console. Let me zoom in to make sure everything works. And great. So let me first replace the alert statement that you see here with a call to our console. And so the way you can call the console is it's a global object. You type in the word console, and then from here, you can access all the properties that will actually end up doing something. So the first thing we want to do is just log a message to indicate that this button has been clicked. So we replace the alert statement with console.log. The log method allows you to specify some things you want to print to this area right here. So I'm going to specify console.log, pass some string, some text. Is this working? Question mark. All right, so I made this change. I'm going to save it, and let me reload the page. Right now, if I were to click on the Click Me text, or the button, notice what you see here. You see the text, is this working, printed on screen, which is great because I'm going to keep clicking it, and you can see that each time I click, you can see that count of the is this working text incrementing every single time. Now, the nice thing is that different browsers will do different things when it comes to these nice little UI touches. Chrome happens to condense them all and give you a count. Other browsers might literally print out every single time you click on the text, and then is this working will be printed many times. Don't worry about those kind of details. And the thing is, because you're dealing with just strings and text right here, you can actually go a little further. So for example, I can say, replace the text in console.log and say, we clicked on plus e.target.id, And this will give us the value of the button that we clicked on instead. So let me click on the button, and notice that we clicked on my button shows up. So you have some flexibility in mixing predefined text with more dynamic things that are going on your page, like the value of various property values and just expressions you might have in your code as just part of defining the things that you do. Now, logging is probably the most common thing you'll do, which is going to be all throughout your code and infinitely better than, for example, alert, because I can actually copy the text, I can select it, I can even save this to a file if I want to, for example, analyze it later, have someone else analyze it. But you have two more methods that you can use to kind of make your logging kind of stand out, and that is warning and error. So I'm going to replace console.log, and let's go ahead and change it to console.warn. And here I'm going to say this is a warning. If I can spell warning correctly. Warning. And let me replace this with console.warn. This is an error. All right. So now if I were to reload my page, notice I'm going to kind of click me. You kind of get what looks like a slightly different text. Oh, I replaced this with, I forgot to mention, rename warning to error. Refresh the page again. Now notice when you click on it, you get your errors and warnings looking a little differently. And each time you do this, you can sort of see that you can actually expand upon it and see the full call stack for all the functions that were actually called. Now, what makes it so cool is that this allows you to do some interesting things where you can mix and match generic logging for just informational purposes to more important things that are probably very relevant for you to analyze and see, because they are, they might cause unwanted behavior, whereas others might just be purely informational for what you are trying to do. And you can mix and match them all the time. So for example, here's what I kind of did just for fun. I'm going to copy and paste some code and we'll talk about it. I decided to replace all of the code for just displaying a static warning or an error based on like number of times the button has actually been clicked. So let me just actually format this properly. Notice here what I did is I create a counter, where counter equals 0. In a do something event handler, I have a counter plus plus. And they have a log that basically says the button has been clicked the number of times. And if the counter value equals a value of 3, I call the show more method, which shows a warning and shows an error. And I'm just showing you this to give you an idea of how you can mix and match logs and warnings as part of your code. And the important part is also to remember is that I'm clicking at 1, 2, 3. You can see that the code executes as expected. Now, what makes this interesting is that all of this stuff, all the console log statements, are only available to you via the developer tools. End users will never actually see it. And so it's actually a really great way for you to kind of separate stuff that might impact what a user sees. If you have an alert statement that you kind of forgot to remove, every person who visits your app and runs the code that has the alert statement will see the alert, which may not be something you really want to do. So that's really all that we had when it comes to the console. The console is one of those things that is actually very flexible and very powerful. We looked at a very small part of the functionality it provides as part of being part of an even larger set of tools, which is the developer tools, where we can do a whole lot more than just print messages on screen. But we got to start somewhere. And I figure a great place to start in getting familiar with developer tools is to learn how to use the console to at least just display messages on screen. And in subsequent videos, we'll dive a little further and look at some other things you can do, such as like modifying the content of your page and being more proactive about altering the state of your application purely from that little text area in the console that we've been seeing messages printed on right now. So if you need any help, post in the forums at forumnetgroup.com, where I and others will be very happy to help. And if you like this, tell your friends and enemies. Hit subscribe to be notified of other videos kind of like this that come up. If you are interested in bite-sized updates on web development topics, funny science gifs, and a lot of cat pictures, follow me at Krupa. And of course, if you want a more detailed overview that follows you step by step from the beginning of JavaScript to learning more advanced topics, check out my book, JavaScript Absolute Beginner's Guide. People seem to like it. I think you'll like it too. So give it a shot. Right, guys? See you next time.